Hi, everyone. It's dietitian Ashley Koff. Thank you so much for joining today. Office hours, as we're all at home, so the home office hours that's going on during this time period. If you are joining us live, thank you so much. Remember, the comment section is available for you to ask your questions at any point. And we would love to hear from you and know where you're joining us from. And if you do have any questions, if you are watching at a time that is better for you, awesome. Thank you for watching. And if you're watching on YouTube and you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. But if you're watching and you have questions as well, especially for our expert, feel free to drop them into the comment section and I will make sure that she gets them and can answer them as well. So today, I wanted to introduce you to a colleague who is doing something totally awesome. And it's been something that I've been following and actually just sort of scratching my noggin on about for quite some time, as a lot of different individuals in my practice over the last couple of years have been having different stem cell procedures, and we've been having conversations about even where the potential of stem cells are. So Dana Elia is a dietitian with many other credentials, as you can see under her title, under her name, and then, well, under her face is her name with her titles. And she's also the author of the new book called The Stem Cell Activation Diet, which I shared the link. It's available on Amazon. We also are giving away a copy today. So yes, that's awesome. So in order to win the Stem Cell Activation Diet, or to be eligible to win, I would love to know what is... let me think if there's a good question. Dana, do you have one that you think is like a great question that you want someone to answer and we'll have them win the book, or am I putting you on the spot with that?
I would say, what is one chronic disease that dietitians are seeing most frequently that could benefit from some stem cell activation?
I love it. Okay, great. So what is a chronic disease that dietitians are frequently seeing that could benefit from some stem cell activation? Awesome. So what I asked Dana to do, I'm going to give us a little roadmap. What I asked her to do is to introduce herself, because I would go on for an hour introducing her. So I'm going to have her introduce herself. And when you read the Stem Cell Activation Diet, you're going to dive deep initially into her story. But I asked her to shorten that, but help us understand why this is personal and what the professional impact that it's had. And then we want to dive into two particular areas I think are especially important for practitioners today. One of those is the whole idea of how do we have informed conversations with our clients about stem cells. There are things ranging from ethics to just what is a stem cell and what is a stem cell not. And what we know in nutrition is when we are sharing the same lexicon, it's such a better conversation, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then the secondary area is how can you actually be proactive in this stem cell activation diet space with making recommendations with your client. And of course, we know that we're not going to just be talking about like, oh, I was talking about heart health or I was talking about diabetes and now I have to talk about stem cell activation. Instead, how can you start to understand where stem cell activation is actually layered within those recommendations? And of course, we'll be taking your questions. So that's that. Let's get started. Over to you, Dana. Who are you and why stem cells?
Thanks so much, Ashley, and thanks for having me on today. Yes, I'm Dana Elia. I've been a registered dietitian for 25 years now. And my interest in stem cells has really stemmed from my own personal journey. So I've been an autoimmune disease sufferer since childhood. I'm a functional medicine and integrative dietitian, and my journey into integrative and more functional medicine has basically come from my own personal journey with my own health issues. So I first started getting really interested in stem cells a few years ago. I had been following the research coming out of UC Davis for quite a long time. Also was playing around with various styles of fasting and fasting mimicking diets and intermittent fasting. And then I actually needed surgery on my left elbow to repair my tendon. And I had done a lot of research, had rehabbed made some dietary changes, but unfortunately I had what my orthopedic surgeon called an across the room MRI. That when they did the MRI on my elbow, they were able to see how bad it was from across the room. So there was no doubt that I was going to need surgery. Had looked into some stem cell therapies and had actually reached out to I'm a cancer survivor, so I had reached out to my oncology team at Fox Chase to see whether or not this was something that I could look at doing some sort of injectable stem cell therapy. Unfortunately, the type of cancer I had was so rare that there was no current research or evidence on the use of injectable stem cells, and especially using my own stem cells for donation to then be injected into the elbow. So that's where diet was really the main therapeutic option and intervention for me. So it was really just exploring some more and doing more stem cell activating diet therapies that I did prior to surgery that in the recovery room, the orthopedic surgeon had said he was a little befuddled. My tendon still needed to be surgically repaired, but he could not explain the difference in the MRI just weeks prior to surgery and then how my tendon actually looked when he went in. And I said, well, let me share some of the things that I've been doing. And thus we had this conversation about diet and stem cell activation and the type of diet that I followed prior to the operation, which, hindsight being 2020, I wish I had the means to have done a pre and post stem cell diet MRI to, actually have some more clinical evidence rather than just my anecdotal N of 1 study. But needless to say, that personal experience just further cemented for me the power that diet truly had, even with manipulating stem cells, and dug into the research even further. And then just about a year ago now, the opportunity came where I was approached by a publishing house. They had a couple of different topics of books that they were looking for a dietitian expert to help them with authorship of. And one of the topics was stem cells. And I said, that just spoke to me so personally because I've had experience. It's something that I've been following for years on the evidence-based. I just finished my doctorate. So it was, yes. We actually had our cohort graduation ceremony virtually.
I was thinking of you. I was like, oh, yes. Yeah. The COVID craziness. And for those of you who are wondering why my hair might be looking a little purplish, it's because we did something crazy here with our family and just decided to rock some pandemic purple for the next few days with some, temporary non-permanent hair dye. And so also happens to be MUIH's color. So I was really trying to rock the school spirit for graduation. I love it.
But needless to say, that it was just, really timely to have the opportunity to write this book, knowing that it was something that I personally believed in, personally experienced, and also have been, following the research on it for so long. So,
well, you've got a couple of colleagues giving you a shout out. So some congratulations coming in. So we really appreciate that part. And, there's no such thing, I believe, there are no such things as coincidences. So Dana's book was actually I was going on vacation on March 12th. And you were the one thing I was so excited to read because, as I said, I've had such a personal interest in this as well. We ended up obviously staycationing, and then I ended up working through the staycation and, blah, blah. But my boyfriend actually has torn the tendon in his elbow, and we only just identified that it was a tear. We couldn't figure out what was going on. And I literally was finally able to dive into your book, and I'm reading this, and I'm like, honey, oh my gosh. And I sent this over, and I was like, oh, we have to, and it was interesting because subsequently I was helping a friend's parents out, and I'm not seeing patients right now, but I said, I'm happy to help him out. We had this whole conversation. He said, and everything that was going on, he's carrying a lot of belly weight, but he's got a back issue. And he said, well, I think my back doctor would like to try some stem cell, stuff going on. And so I literally just referred your book to him and his wife. And I said, hey, why don't we think about this opportunity that, because nothing's happening right now. We could improve your diet around, and interestingly, he's more willing to do some of the things because they're called stem cell activation than when I was like, hey, this might make you feel better, like you could poop better, like any of these other things. So that's my crazy, like, very, like, self-focused way of saying, like, this is such an opportunity when you read this book to realize how we can have different conversations with our patients, but also an area of opportunity with practitioners to get on the same page. So I'd love to have you touch a little bit on let's put the ethics aside. I just don't even want to get into that conversation today. But what are some of the confusing, like I'll hear stem cell come up. Sometimes people will say PRP. There's like a lot of, so what are some of the conversation things that you think are really important for a practitioner to clarify and know to be able to have that conversation either with another practitioner or with their patient?
Well, I think first of all, when you're looking at like the injectable side of stem cells, so PRP versus injectable stem cell therapy, I think, one of the things as clinicians that is kind of frightening is when you see these, hotel conference room infomercial type programs that are being advertised and promising the world, and telling patients this can cure this, that, and the other thing. So like if you're hearing that, or if your patients are raising those types of, pie in the sky kind of dreams with you, make sure you're educating them that unfortunately, because there's very little regulation right now on these different types of therapies, some patients are potentially going to be at risk for something dangerous and definitely at risk for losing a lot of money. So,
and Rosemary jumped in here. She said her MIL did stem cell in her lower back and did not get results. So I think that's exactly what Dana is talking about. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of stories about that. And that's where, the nice thing about using the diet is you're harvesting the power of your own stem cells and optimizing what you have within, rather than, relying on an external injectable that may or may not contain what the provider is promising you. I've heard horror stories of patients traveling, out of the country, spending tens of thousands of dollars on therapies, and was really a sham. So, and there are some risks that are involved with any of these therapies. So, and then the cost is a huge factor. So, if you're utilizing diet and manipulating your food choices to activate your stem cells, it's a much more safe as well as economical way to optimize your stem cells.
So for those of us just joining, we are diving in deep on stem cells today with Dana Elia, and her new book, The Stem Cell Activation Diet, is an incredible resource for practitioners. I was just saying, for both your patients to help you have a shared lexicon, get on the same page, for you to talk with practitioners, and then also for you to have resources around this dietary approach. And we are giving away one book. So if you can name what is one chronic disease that dietitians are seeing most frequently or very frequently, that you can benefit from stem cell activation, a dietary approach, that would be, you are eligible to win. We've got some people weighing in here, so I'll be curious at the end. Dana's going to tell us what the answer would be. And Rosemary followed up. She said that's exactly what she did, a dinner conference at a local restaurant, spent $6,000. If no results, they'll inject her again for an additional $3,000. So we have got to keep our patients, like any dietary approach or like anything that's out there from a treatment approach, we've got to keep our patients off of these off this money train on that piece. So let's dive into, go ahead, Dana. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we need to make the distinction that there are, very evidence-based stem cell therapies out there for specific diagnoses. I think where the commercialized marketing kind of just capitalizes is, knowing that because stem cells have that ability to self-renew and they can differentiate into, literally over 200 different cell types in the body. So, when you use that as a marketing theme, that they're regenerative, they're miracle workers, you start having that really flowery language that, hooks people in, and those who are dealing with with chronic pain or chronic health issues, some folks, they're at wit's end and they're willing to do anything, pay anything, looking for that, that one magic bullet. And most of us recognize as dietitians that the one area that a lot of our patients and a lot of other providers probably have not spent enough time focusing in on is diet. Yeah. Is the power that food truly has to be transformative medicine. So that's where, from a stem cell perspective, if you have anybody who is even remotely thinking about, PRP or stem cell injections, and they haven't looked at how their diet can play a role in activating this or even optimizing the environment that these stem cells are going to live in, they're wasting their money. So, they need to look at what they're putting in first. So that's where I think, first and foremost, above any sort of external stem cell therapy, we all subscribe to the food first philosophy. So, food truly is transformative and is powerful medicine. And that's one of the resounding themes in the book, is just really taking advantage of just how potent of a stem cell activator food truly can be.
So let's dive into from a food standpoint, and we did get a question on supplements, so we'll get there in a second, but let's start food first in terms of what are those potent stem cell activators?
So it's really mostly about the style of diet that you're using first and foremost. So in the book, I spent a lot of time discussing the evidence behind caloric restriction versus the use of an age-old practice of fasting. And that the overwhelming body of evidence in terms of where is the research most powerful for activating stem cells and the process of autophagy, which is really, cell spring cleaning, which is what you want to activate in stimulating your stem cells, is we know that fasting style diets are more potent activators of the autophagy process. The main difference between caloric restriction, because you will get stem cell activation from calorie restriction, but the thing is, with calorie restriction, you also run the risk of losing lean muscle mass, where we know fasting does not tend to increase the lean muscle mass loss to the same extent that caloric restriction does. So it's about activating stem cells through those caloric restriction / fasting mechanisms, but then also making sure that the food that you are providing is extremely anti-inflammatory, less allergen promoting, more nutrient dense without being calorically dense. So again, as dietitians, we think, food first. It's always about opting for a more plant-based, non-starchy vegetable, plant-based proteins, and including more micronutrient diverse foods, following that rainbow, that variety of produce, and eliminating as much of the processed packaged convenience sugar-laden foods. So, the first step in even beginning to set the stage with your patients about broaching the conversation for stem cell activation is, how can we first just, get them on a more level playing field with just cleaning up their diet first and foremost.
So fasting is like one of those crazy words right now, right? So
everybody's on the fasting bandwagon.
Yes, I think there's a lexic, and we hear autophagy, and so somebody is like, okay, is that prolon? Like right now we need to know exactly. So talk a little bit about the difference. Like maybe are we talking about an 8-hour eating window, a 10-hour eating window? Is there a dramatic difference there with stem cells? Let's make an assumption initially that the diet all being the same, right? Like, okay, somebody's compliant on a dietary standpoint. We'll get into that in a moment. But what, from a fasting standpoint, is it the time frame that is making the difference, or is it a type of fasting?
A little bit of both. So you mentioned prolon, okay? So, and I want to make the disclaimer, I am not on El Nutra's payroll at all. So I am not getting any endorsements or any perks or anything from L-Nutra or the manufacturers of Prolon. However, I do say in the book that, I am a believer in using Prolon as a fasting mimicking diet tool for stem cell activation. And it's a product that I use personally. It was what I used pre-surgery for my tennis elbow surgery. But you don't necessarily have to invest in a product like Prolon to, optimize stem cells. One of the things about using a fasting mimicking diet kit is the compliance and the convenience aspect. So, and we know when you're using anything that's in a kit that aids convenience, there's also that cost that's involved. So it's, part of having that conversation with your patient about the degree of convenience that they want, factored in with the degree of cost that they're willing to bear.
And I'm just we jumped in again to make sure everybody's on the same page. So Prolon is the brand name, and L-Nutra, there is a fasting mimicking diet approach that is now marketed, and you can get a kit, and practitioners, you can even get it through your full script, but practitioners can get it and use it with their clients. And it comes with this delicious, and trust me, it's delicious when you're on it. It's a 5-day program, and it comes with a breakfast bar, olives, these like kale chips, and then packaged dried soups. And so, they're in the world of, as she was saying, it's a doable kit. There's less on the time restriction, though, when you're on that. That is more of a caloric restriction. So, but also designed to have you get in high nutrient density. Yeah.
Right. The first, it is a 5-day kit. The first day's worth of food keeps you at about 1,100 calories. And then once you're in day 2 through 5, you're averaging about 700 to 800 calories per day. So if anybody has read the longevity diet or followed Walter Longo's work out of UC Davis and the Longevity Institute, the Prolon kit was designed based on the longevity diet to be a more convenient option. But the fasting mimicking diet, or FMD, as you'll see used in the literature as the abbreviation, has been studied and shown to have stem cell activation, a very potent activator for stem cells.
Great.
But we also know that fasting, even doing a 24-hour fast, also activates stem cells. The benefit of doing a fasting mimicking diet is having that 5-day period, the length of time that you're in that fasting mode. So, the difference with a fasting mimicking diet is your body thinks it's staying fully fasted for those 5 days, but you are eating. So you're eating a calorie controlled diet, but for compliance standpoint, you are eating. So you're not doing like a prolonged water fast. That's a whole nother Facebook conversation.
Yes.
Is the research behind using water fasts. So I think
the question on the time frame of the fasting is a time restricted fasting. Is that also, have we seen value in certain time slots as associated with stem cell?
So if you're doing like a time restricted feeding, or what had been, traditionally referred to as intermittent fasting over the last few years, you'll see more benefits from intermittent fasting and time restricted feeding in terms of body composition changes and insulin control. In terms of stem cell activation, though, you really want using fasting, you have to get to that 18, 20, 24-hour period before you really start optimizing and activating stem cells. So I'm still an intermittent faster. I've been an intermittent faster for years now. I follow a 16 and 8 regimen. And I continue to do that because of the benefits that I've seen personally from fasting.
Great.
But in terms of, and that's where you want to kind of narrow down the conversation with your patients, is if you're using time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, what is the goal? Like, what are you utilizing that tool for? Is it for, anti-inflammatory benefits? Are you trying to, have an impact on glycemic control? Are you using it as a weight loss tool, cholesterol, things like that?
But
so,
not necessarily like your go-to for the stem cell side of it, which I think is for the activation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's where a 24-hour fast is utilized to activate stem cells. So that's where you want to make the differentiation between, having a long-term fasting practice in terms of, time restricted feeding, alternate day fasting, 5 and 2. There's a variety of different styles of fasting. But when you're looking at fasting in terms of specifically for stem cell activation, that's where it's the 24-hour fast. And that's where the longer, the research has shown, if you can fast for 2 to 3 days, that's where you optimize the most impact for stem cells, which is why the fasting mimicking diets kind of make things more realistic and sustainable for our patients. Do you have folks that could potentially go, 36 hours without eating? Some folks might be able to do that. I don't necessarily recommend patients going longer than 24 hours without being supervised. And you need to choose your patients wisely, and also looking at what are some of the comorbidities and their medical history. Yeah. So that's where using, fasting mimicking style diets can give you the best of both worlds. You're fooling the body into thinking that it's fasting, and fasting for, 5 days, but you're also still being fed. So there's the compliance factor there.
Awesome. And Guthrie was pointing out, she said she had done Prolon monthly for a full year straight and now has her own FMD version. So I think that's also a great FMD, meaning fasting mimicking diet. I think it's one of those things that you can really, as Dana was saying as well, like the ability to have a kit is just like, hey, it's done for me. It's like ordering a juice cleanse or ordering a meal plan or ready food. Like, hey, I can follow this. But that's also a teachable tool. And so from an investment standpoint, you could have somebody where you say, hey, we're going to do this once or twice with this, and then we're going to have you do, we're going to do it on your own without that ongoing investment. And so there's opportunity. Dana, I wanted to get, one of our colleagues is interested in knowing about stem cell potential for interstitial cystitis.
Yes. Yeah. So actually one of my classmates in my doctoral program spends a lot of time doing research on IC. And that's really where from the entire autoimmune spectrum, we do see a lot of improvement and the anti-inflammatory benefits that stem cell activation or even fasting and a fasting mimicking diet can have. So, and being an autoimmune sufferer myself, that it is one of the tools that I use to keep my autoimmune disease in remission. And I've used it with IC patients as well and have seen benefits. And, a dear friend of mine has also used various forms of fasting to help keep, her IC in remission as well. So yes, it would be a useful tool for the IC population as well.
Awesome. So as with anything in the dietary space, as soon as we think like, oh, there's something new, it can be really overwhelming. You've done a great job of really merging and having the conversation around fasting. Some other things that often come up, I've heard actually conflicting information about inflammatory status when you're actually looking at stem cell activation, in terms of, do you want to be following a but do you want to be following an anti-inflammatory diet, or do you actually want to allow, like, that you want to look at your omega-3s and omega-6s? So I'm just curious if there are any of those things that maybe felt like things that might surprise us as we're going through the stem cell activation diet. And then we'll also talk about what's complementary that's just good for us. I mean, you've touched on what's good for us. So let me stop there and have you answer. Yeah.
So, part of the research for the book was reaching out to the experts. And I had some really wonderful conversations with researchers and experts who are really diving into stem cells and stem cell activation and dietary manipulation. So, one of the conversations that we had was, where do you draw the line? Like, where is enough is enough, and can you potentially, overactivate? And this is definitely an area of concern in particularly in the keto side of things, because of so there is research showing that being in ketosis, but a ketogenic diet having a benefit in stem cell activation, particularly in the gut. But then we also look at the long-term changes that can occur from following a ketogenic diet, especially when people who are doing, more dirty keto forms.
I've heard that expression. I love it. Dirty keto. Yes. Okay, I'm borrowing that. Yeah.
But then, when you're following any sort of restricted diet, what's the long-term consequences? So, like, what's the downstream effect? So, using keto as an example, we know that being on a ketogenic diet can alter the landscape of the microbiome and shift the diversity of the microbiota in the gut. We know the role that the microbiota play in cellular health and activation, and even impacting our stem cells. So, where do you draw the line? Where is enough is enough? So that's where I think the conversation to have with patients is, particularly with dietary changes, is when you're using a stem cell activation diet, it's meant to be a short-term intervention. It's not, like following a Mediterranean diet for a long-term, sustainable lifestyle. So, making sure that the tool that you're using to activate stem cells is just that. It's that short-term intervention, but also using it as a bridge and a teaching tool to set the landscape for the long-term, healthful, sustainable plan that your patients are going to be following.
I think that is so valuable. So I know we have the question about supplements, so I'm going to pop in there and ask that question. But if you have any others, I try to keep these to that half hour. But I was like, Dana, there's so many questions I could ask. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. And of course, we have to get to the answer for our giveaway. So the question came in a way like, let's just go with it. Like, are there supplements that you use for stem cell as part of the stem cell activation diet?
So the short-term answer is no. So we don't use supplements or vitamin mineral supplements during the stem cell activation component. Because remember, it's a short-term plan. So and there's a whole chapter in the book about the use of micronutrients. Now, you'll notice, like, if you are using a prolonged kit, there is a small micronutrient and fish oil supplement in the kit. The thing is, though, when, it kind of seems a little counterintuitive, but when you follow the logic, the reason why we don't use micronutrient supplementation during stem cell activation is because we are trying to stimulate autophagy. So, you're trying to activate that cell death for those older, more unhealthy cells. So you want to activate that spring cleaning. If you're providing additional nutrients, you're essentially helping the cells to be sustained, and thus you're not going to get that spring cleaning, that autophagy that you're seeking. So during the stem cell activation diet component, you'll hold off on micronutrient or the use of supplements. Then it's up to you working with your patient to decide, what micronutrient supplementation or supplements in general would be indicated for that particular patient for the long haul.
And what about coffee, caffeine?
So yes, so caffeine and coffee are to be avoided during the stem cell activation diet. So while you're trying to optimize stem cells, you do want to refrain from coffee and caffeine.
Noted. So that's going to be one to talk to your patients and work with them on. Okay, so what is, if we're going to pick a winner in here, what is the disease that dietitians are working with frequently that could really benefit from stem cell activation?
So what are some of the apps, since I'm not looking
Oh,
at...
yes, I'll tell you. Okay, so we've had, IBS with constipation, arthritis, diabetes, let's see, pre-diabetes, obesity. Let's see if I got anyone else in here. I think I got everybody's. Oh, there was the one about interstitial cystitis. Hang on, let me just see. Alzheimer's, heart disease, diabetes. And then we have one other question that came in, so I will ask that question in a moment. Yeah.
So I would say obesity would be the most, the one that would be the most common, that most dietitians, are dealing with. And then, under that obesity arm, you would also see patients with diabetes, pre-diabetes, autoimmune issues. But when we look at the statistics and the data, the obesity epidemic, I think that's going to be the one umbrella diagnosis that all the others...
Rosemary, you just won yourself a book. Woohoo! And you know what? Rosemary's the one who's been telling us about her friend. So I also think that it was either a friend or a patient. She's going to have this beautiful, beautiful conversation. So the gift that keeps on giving in that part. Rosemary, if you want to email us your address to team@thebetternutritionprogram.com, we will connect you with Dana so you can get your book. But Dana, you were saying something else, definitely.
So the one thing particularly about diabetics, so while, diabetes is definitely a disease state that this patient population can benefit from, particularly your type 2 diabetes, there is the caution there that if you're going to be using, Prolon or any sort of stem cell activating diet in a diabetic patient, you absolutely want to make sure that you're doing that in conjunction with their providers, because there's definitely going to need to be some medication dose adjustment. That's a patient population that I would say, unless you're, very comfortable with working with diabetics and altering their medication or insulin regimen, you would want to, kind of tread lightly, make sure that you're working within your scope.
So another question, thank you so much for that. I think that, and so another question that came in, is there any limitation regarding the age and pre-existing condition for a patient to try this? And then also, how often can a person try this diet in their life? So that may also be related to the fasting piece, but I will, let's keep it related to the stem cell activation just for the purposes of the question for you. Yeah.
So what the research has shown in terms of using stem cell diet manipulation for stem cell activation is, utilizing it, doing it once a month for the first 3 months is where you've seen the greatest benefit from the research that UC Davis has been doing. And then the ideal is to stick with it about once a quarter, so almost seasonally. So I do a 5-day plan every 3 to 4 months, kind of like my little maintenance tweaking. But, some folks, I have some patients that opt to do it twice a year. But if you're looking to have the greatest benefit and greatest maintenance, I would say, once a month for the first 3 months, and then quarterly for maintenance. As in terms of age, I certainly wouldn't do this in a pediatric patient, but where the older adult, where the mature adult could definitely benefit from this is the impact that stem cell activation has on aging and signs of aging. And, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say it's going to magically reverse aging, but it will have some marked improvement on those more aging pro-inflammatory markers. So I think for your mature patient, this could truly be a useful tool for them. We also know, the evidence is there that as we age, decreasing our caloric intake and following a more fasting style plan has been shown to be, beneficial in slowing down the aging process.
Awesome. I actually had a question that came up, and then we are going to cut it. Thank you, everyone, for gifting us a little extra time. one of the things also I just want to mention, for those of you that were asking questions about the fasting, we do have a great fasting guide as part of your shop of tools developed with one of our colleagues at the Cleveland Clinic, and she goes through these different types. I think what Dana was talking about with autophagy is just so important to understand, and Dana does an incredible job in her book. So I would use those two as resources for you there. And then the additional question I have is, as you're talking about, especially in those first 3 months on a monthly basis, one of the things that I'm very focused on with women is how their hormonal cycle impacts that. So is there a recommendation if you're using this, if you do decide to do this, but right before your period, during your period, after your period, can it have an impact on your period? Like, talk to us a little bit about that part of it.
Yeah, so anytime you're making major shifts in any dietary regimen, for women who are still menstruating, there's always the potential there to have shifts in your period. The thing with fasting style programs is you're generally going to experience some loss of fat tissue. So, the role that estrogen and fat metabolism has, and just estrogen levels based on your body composition. So you could potentially see a shift in hormonal balance. I've had patients tell me that their periods actually were improved. Their cycles were more regular. So I tend to have my patients do their fasting program after their periods. So, the good time to start it would be about 3 to 4 days after your period has ended.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. That was going to be a nod to everyone that has to be around someone as well. Don't try to, if it's somebody's first time fasting, please don't try it right before their period. That's just unusual.
Fasting and PMS are probably
and definitely not while quarantining. Dana, we have another one of our colleagues regarding the interstitial cystitis that would love to get in touch with you. And I apologize, I can't see who that is that was asking that question, but just email us, team at the Better Nutrition Program. Email us, there we go, team, and we will connect you with Dana on that part. Thank you so much for doing all of this work and the research. And I have to say, I have just been craving this book for so long, and it is so easy to use. I love that you start off with your personal story, and really, I think that infuses a lot of the conversational component to it. So everybody, I think this is a must get, just to have, at minimum, to have as a resource yourself, but feel really comfortable recommending it to clients, and it's an easy read. So that one is oftentimes, for a difficult topic, it's an easy read. Yeah.
Yes, and it was written with the layperson in mind.
Right.
So, but I've had people tell me that they want to use it as a textbook. So.
No, absolutely. And I think these days there's and your colleagues are saying, thank you very much. We need more of the practitioner written for layperson, where it's like, oh, this is actually how we have that conversation, what you can take from it, what you can be doing. Because the science is really important here, but what you do is you make the science very approachable for all of us. So really appreciate that. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I would love to, and thank you for everyone who's checking in, especially during these crazy times. If anyone would like more information, we can connect you to Dana. Dana, where, remind me what your website is if somebody wants to reach out.
Sure. So you can actually reach out to me through the stemcellactivationdiet.com.
There you go. Easy.
Yep. So
talk about branding. Nailed it. Just so easy on that part. Stemcellactivationdiet.com. Is there a the at the beginning? The stem cell activation, or is it just stem cell activation diet?
Stem cell activation.
Okay, no the. So there's a the in the Better Nutrition Program. There's no the in hers. So stemcellactivationdiet.com. You can go there. Everyone, we'll see you back here next Tuesday for another office hours. And if you're around on Saturday, I know Sunday's Easter for a lot of people. Well, Sunday is Easter, and that affects a lot of people. But on Saturday, we'll be doing another one of our virtual coffees with 2 other colleagues. And we're talking this week about some email and social media marketing tips and things like that. So just doing what we can to help support everyone during these times where we're trying to continue to revenue generate and, of course, be of service. And to all of our colleagues who are helping everyone in this time period, thank you so much for everything that you are doing. And if there's any way that we can be a resource for you, let us know on that part as well. All right, everyone. And Rosemary, like the Ohio State. There you go. Exactly. Rosemary is like another Buckeye on that part. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.